And joining us in the studio to give us a deeper insight into the election results is Ng Yeen Seen, who's from the prominent think tank Asli.
Yes. Thank you for having me here, Natasha.
All right, Yeen Seen, why do you think Team Adenan won big? Would you attribute the victory to popularity or other factors like the rift between DAP and PKR?
Now, first thing first, we have to recognize that the rift between DAP and PKR did not help the opposition in gaining grounds this time around, even though I believe that they worked very hard. But one thing that none of us can deny here is that the Adenan fever was really high and strong in the entire Sarawak. The fact that DAP lost their 5 urban seats, which are majority Chinese in the urban areas mostly to SUPP candidates, is a telling sign that Adenan fever is very strong leading into the election. And I also feel that the Chief Minister of Sarawak, TURNOUT, over the last 2 years, with his own track record of announcing correct policies to what the people want, it's actually a living manifesto in his own way. He is actually the one who could capture the imagination of the people of Sarawak by giving the people new hope, fresh perspective of what real politics is all about. And when TURNOUT talked a lot about autonomy for Sarawak, returning the rights of Sarawakians to Sarawak according to the Malaysian agreement, all these go down very well with the people, not only with the urbanites, with the rural folks, but I would say that looking at the election result as a whole, what TURNOUT has been doing over the last 2 years is a proven track record that this is the way forward for Barisan Nasional.
Now, you mentioned earlier that DAP was the biggest loser in the election,
yes,
and it won only 7 out of 30 seats contested, lost the 8 seats the party won in the 2011 elections.
Yep.
Why do you think this occurred?
You mean why they lost their seats? I think like what Asmi and Ali said just now, I think the people in Sarawak, number one, they definitely will be very confused why in the entire Pakatan Harapan, 2 parties couldn't come to an agreement as in who stand in which seat. So there's one, when you don't have a consensus, you actually split your election machineries, and when you split your supporters, and then adding on to people getting confused of what you want to do, really, I think that put people off. Adding on to that, if you also look into the election manifesto of DAP and PKR, both manifestos did not really talk a lot about the state issues that Sarawak is facing. In fact, DAP and PKR manifestos are more of federal issues, and I think people today know exactly how to differentiate between the state election and the federal parliamentary election. So when DAP and PKR were harping on federal issues, I think that also put some people off as well. But again, the Adenan fever was very high. TURNOUT was riding so high, and I think he is going to ride very high for the following few years. I think those are some pertinent factors as in why DAP in particular have not only lost so many of their seats, but in my perspective, I think they lost the battleground this time around.
And going back to the issues between DAP and PKR, do you think the rift could affect Pakatan Harapan, the coalition as a whole?
I think the situation in Sarawak is a little bit different compared to Semenanjung, but the fact that Semenanjung leaders didn't really put their foot down, or they tried but they couldn't get to a consensus, we don't know because we are non-insiders, showed that perhaps it's because Pakatan Harapan until today does not have a very apparent leader, knowing that Anwar Ibrahim is not exactly, doing what he needs to do because he's not here. Therefore, maybe that's the reason why people are fighting.
Also, there was a poor turnout among Chinese voters. In your opinion, was this in protest of DAP?
Yes and no, depending on which perspective you are going to take on. For sure, the urbanites and the Chinese people like TURNOUT. He is the CM for everybody. This can be seen in almost all the polls, and by talking to people, the sentiment is there. And the traditional DAP stronghold seats, mostly in the Chinese areas and in the urban areas, this time around, the people decided to not come out to vote because on one hand, they want to support CM. On the other hand, they are also torn in between, voting for CM or they want to support DAP, because one of the main tagline or the election campaign messages that DAP have put forward is a vote for Adenan is a vote for Najib. And therefore, the way DAP and PKR have framed the election, the campaign messages have somehow to a certain extent put people off, because on one hand, you feel that, okay, if you vote for Adenan, you're actually voting for a federal government, but in fact, it is not the case because it's a state election. But on the other hand, they like their CM as well. So not knowing how to make the decision, or people are just feeling fed up or confused, they decided not to come out to vote. And therefore, in certain areas, the voter turnout rate was as low as 50%.
Okay, now going back to the BN's landslide win, do you think that it has any bearing for the ruling coalition in the peninsula? Could it set the tone for the next general election?
Looking at the landslide victory of yesterday evening, looking at it at the surface, I don't think it is an indication as to how the sentiment it's going to be for Semenanjung, simply because that was a state election. We are talking about parliamentary election with federal issues over here. But I think one lesson learned for all, or one lesson that that leaders can learn in Semenanjung is that I think the Adenan style is going to work, to be a liberal, to be very open about things, a leader that will take care of all communities and all races. I think that's moving forward. That should be the way how political leaders lead this country into the next general election.
Now, shifting focus a bit, do you think it'll be a challenge for Tan Sri Adnan to put together his cabinet? It'll be made up of BN component parties and direct candidates, which all contributed to the coalition's landslide victory.
I think Tok Nan will be wise enough to choose the most talented, the most knowledgeable people with experience to join his state cabinet. But sometimes politicians may not be experienced, because they could be the first time candidate and then they won landslide because everybody ride on the wave of Adenan Satem yesterday. But I think CM Sarawak would have the wisdom to choose the best team, because in his manifesto leading into election yesterday, the tagline was "Give Team Adenan a chance." So whoever, I would say that whoever candidate who actually contributed to this landslide victory is actually part of Team Adenan. And whether or not every individual, of course, it's not going to be possible for all the 70-something, state assemblymen to be in the state cabinet. But the fact that whether you are in the state cabinet or the fact that you are in Sarawak Dun, I think you are already in Team Adenan. I think that is the most important of all.
Okay, thanks, Yeen Seen, so much for breaking it down to me in layman terms like that. It explains so well.
Thank you very much.
We'd love to have you back again.
Thank you.